Good, so very good morning, everybody. Nice to see you, be with you. Those of you who are here Zooming, and for those of you who are catching up YouTubing, then good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. We are studying Abhidharma. Abhidharma is one of the three famous baskets of the Buddha's teaching. But then the Buddha's teaching, as it developed over the centuries, became the Shravaka, or the minimal version of the Buddha's teaching, and the Mahayana version of the Buddha's teaching, with different agendas, different objectives. The Bodhisattva's way being a much vaster objective. Both want to get out of the suffering of samsara, the ignorance of samsara, the limitation of samsara. But the Bodhisattva wants to become like Buddha, to help everybody. So we are studying Abhidharma, but as Bodhisattvas, it's very important to have that behind all of your Abhidharma study. Because of course, in the Shravaka traditions, like Theravada tradition, they also study Abhidharma. But the motivation, the use of Abhidharma in your own meditation practice is not quite the same. So it's very important that we start today our study of Abhidharma with the best motivation, a beautiful, loving heart, caring for each and every sentient being, from the tiniest and seemingly most insignificant to, the very big and powerful ones, humans, devas, demons, whatever, that have strong, influential minds. We care for all of them, with an amazing love and compassion, because that's what we are, that's what we're becoming, bodhisattvas. Our only translation method for relating to life is compassion and love, simplicity, peace, purity. So let's refresh our memory of those wonderful qualities. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on until we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and all six transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well. May they live long, be healthy, be well provided for, have good friends, find respect, live in places of peace and plenty, and most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for those good circumstances to be their wealth in future lives, and be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being totally beyond suffering, and attain the great equanimity that's free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamavati shameta shatra Om Kuri Mare Jite Karote Kiorite Jowati Oloyane Bishudane Male Malapana Ye Kukure Kaka Grasana Omuki Paramuki Amuki Shammedawane Savagra Bandanane Negri Hitva Savabhava Pravadina Vimukta Marapasha Savitva Buddhamudra Anugatita Savamare Putsarita Parishude Biga Shantu Savamara Kama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our heads on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So here we are. Today is, I think, third, I've lost track already, but the third of our teachings on Mipam Rinpoche's Kenjuk. And so in the Mipam Kenjuk, then the text has the good beginning, the good middle, the good end. The good beginning is the introduction, the title, the author's commitment and intention. We're in the good middle. The good middle's in 3 main parts: 10 fields of knowledge, leading to the 4 vidyas, the 4 great intelligences, which enable us to teach authentically with the 4 seals of Dharma. 10, 4, 4. So we're in the 10 fields of knowledge. In the 10 fields of knowledge, we're in number 1, which is the aggregates. The aggregates, there are 5. Form, feeling, cognition, mental creations, samskaras, and consciousness. So far we've looked briefly at form and at feelings, and last time we started on cognition. By now, you might be thinking, well, just a moment, that's a couple of weeks we've been with Ken and these talks, and basically, what's he told us? Well, we've got 5 senses and a mind. Our eyes see things, our ears hear sounds, our nose smells. And then things produce feelings. I knew all that. What's new? Did we spend 3 hours together just so he could tell us that? This Abhidharma is kind of a rip-off. Somebody's just formulated what we all know and put it into boxes and categories and given it numbers. In a way, it's true. I mean, I don't think there's been anything really new that you didn't know, if you think about it. So what are we doing? What are we doing? Well, first of all, we are just starting. And we were talking before the session started about Khenpo Sotin Jamso, and I was telling people I was his first student in the West, and we were going to travel for 6 months in a bus with the 16th Karmapa, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to exchange Tibetan with the lamas, rinpoches, and monks we were traveling with. So I asked Akon Rinpoche. It was very funny. He didn't say, "Oh, good idea," or "No." He said, "I'll ask His Holiness." So he asked His Holiness. And the reply came back the next day from the Karmapa: "Yes, but you won't learn colloquial Tibetan. You'll learn Dharma Tibetan with Khenpo every day." So for 6 months, as we were traveling all around Europe, I had Dharma lessons every day with Khenpo Sutim Jamso. He was, at the time when he first arrived, he wasn't the Khenpo most of you know or have heard about. He had a reputation for being quite strict and quite severe, and it was quite daunting because we heard about him before he came. His Holiness's party came from America, and they decided they needed Khenpo for the tour, so they brought him over from India, from Rumtek. He arrived a few days later, so when we went to pick him up from the airport, we were kind of, who's this guy we're going to be studying with? And he looked very serious when he first came. And during the 6 months, nearly all that first 6 months of travel, he was quite serious. It worked out so well that instead of him going back to Rumtek to his students, because he was one of the 2 abbots of Rumtek, His Holiness asked him to stay in Europe and for us to set up for 6 months a place where we could start training new translators, people like Jim Scott and so on, who came along and became Khenpo's translators later, and where we could start translating with Khenpo major texts like the Buddha Nature text or Khenpopa's main book. And then the Karmapa also sent over a wonderful person, Acharya Tempanegi, who had Sanskrit, Tibetan, and English. The first Tibetan I ever heard quote Shakespeare. So he was perfectly fluent in all 3 languages. So anyway, then in that 6 months, I remember again and again Khenpo saying, be patient. Because when we had topics like we're studying now, we'd have so many questions. And he'd say, no, next month we'll do this, the month after that we'll do that. You'll get the answers then. There's no point talking about it now because you don't know the next bit well enough. So just be patient. So we are learning a new vocabulary. Of course, it's stuff that's obvious, some of it, and we know already, but we're only just starting with the aggregates, and they will become our basic vocabulary for then exploring how things work, the real Dharma, about how we make karma and so on. But we need to not just establish the terms, but get the feeling of what these terms meant when Buddha taught them, when people studied them in Pali, in Sanskrit, and in Tibetan, which doesn't always mean what the words mean. In English, for instance, feeling. Feeling or feelings is a word in English full of resonances. We've seen now already last week that feeling in Dharma, it's easy, it's simple. Either you feel good, or you don't feel good, or you don't feel anything. That's it. So this is why we need to go systematically through to get the language. And then in practice, because otherwise learning is useless, in practice, in applying that language, then we will discover a new way of looking at ourselves, as we do through mindfulness of body, feelings, mind, Dharma, and in particular, sitting in meditation. It gives us the very clear, precise, scientific, analytical tools to know what we are observing and to see it in a new way. Now, silly example, modern example, maybe even it doesn't mean anything to any of you, but there was, I think, a TV series called Star Trek. Does that mean anything to anybody? And there's one guy in it who comes from another planet. He's got pointy ears, and he sees things differently. In particular, he doesn't have emotions. So he's kind of observing human beings when they get emotions about something and trying to explain it. I suppose a bit like lots of people do these days, chemicals, this chemical discharging in your brain, so you feel happy, or this one's discharging in your brain, so you don't feel unhappy or whatever. He can see all of that, but he can't get emotions because he doesn't have them. He's got this logical, analytical sort of way of observing. Now, we are not trying to become, which planet is he from? Vulcan, I think, or something like that. So anyway, we're not trying to become Spock, we're trying to become good Buddhists, which is far deeper. So we will see ourselves with this new vocabulary, new language. We start to see ourselves with some objectivity, I think is the word. Whereas before we've been wrapped up in ourselves. We only saw ourselves through our own conditioning. That's the problem with our confusion. We weren't born with a parallel clarity to see our confusion. We developed our confusion, or it was there, and we see the confusion through the confusion. So Abhidharma and meditation gives us a way of examining our historical self, how we grew up, what we became, how we function, with new, clear, precise eyes. And after that, we can make our own choices. We're much more able to throw away what we want to throw away, to get rid of it. Might take time, might not be easy, but we can see what we're doing. There's some jobs in a garden you move into. I remember when my folks moved into a new property when I was 9. The whole garden had been turned up by diggers. It was an absolute mess of tree stumps and thick clay, foul-smelling clay on top of it. So gradually that turned into a garden, vegetable garden, flower garden. So you could see what there was to do. Seeing what there is to do doesn't mean it's easy. It means it's a lot of work and patience, but you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. So we can see what we want to reduce, get rid of in ourselves. We can see the goodness that's there that we want to reinforce, we want to increase, we want to expand, make it more helpful for us. New qualities we don't have. We want to acquire them, like meditation skills. So anyway, please be patient. And then it's very important that we don't just listen to facts or memorize facts, but that we explore these things for ourselves. It's what it's all about. Abhidharma, as I mentioned in the first talk, when we do Vajrayana practice, and you have these exotic figures, dancing figures, naked figures, wrathful figures, peaceful figures, they are no more than the embodiment of the reality of Abhidharma. Abhidharma is us looking at it, putting labels on things. But what we're looking at's there. You have feeling. Some things feel nice, some things don't feel nice. You have eyes that see form, and so on. So the reality is there. Vajrayana forms are no more than the manifestation of that once liberated. So anyway, I did want to say that, and to emphasize what I've already asked you to do, which is related to the aggregate of form, and that is to explore what we studied, your 5 senses, become aware of them as what you are. You are going around, you're this pair of eyes, sort of this ability to see, looking at things, choosing what to look at, what book to read, where to go, what experience these eyes will have. You're in this body, we've got legs, and these days vehicles that can take this body places. So you can go up a hill or up a mountain, and so that your eyes can see what you see from the top of a mountain. Or you can go underwater and see fishes, this kind of thing. These things, we've got these things. They've seen. You have however many years you're old, that many years, history of what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've felt and touched with your body, the experiences your body has had, and so on. So we need to explore this and with a view to realizing how absolutely unique your experience is, because otherwise we just assume I'm in the same world as everybody else. Now, when we get later on in the teachings of these 10 fields of knowledge about Four Truths and so on, then we'll explore this topic of what is common in our world. And just now we've got a Zoom talk in common, right? There are 39 people here. It's kind of, we're all here in Ken's Zoom talk. You're all listening to the same Ken, seeing the same Ken. Or are you? Are there 39 different versions going on in 39 different heads? Well, so we look at that later, but first we need this vocabulary. But the point is to actually really explore it. When you be aware when you're looking, be aware when you're listening. I've had some wonderful experience with film crew. It's amazing to work with a cameraman or camerawoman, because they don't quite see things like other people. They see things. And then the sound person, they've got ears everywhere. They've got their big microphone with the woolly thing around it, and you're just about to do the take, and they say, no, aeroplane. And you didn't hear it, but they heard an aeroplane in the distance, so you have to wait 5 minutes till it's come and it's gone. They hear, they really hear. The cameraman really sees. I've got some friends who love food. Well, they really eat. I mean, they taste things most people don't. I grew up a gobbler. It kind of goes in and goes down very quickly. I'm not a savourer where at the moment, for my health, I'm taking a mild form of arsenic, which is actually, it's in the kernels of apricot seeds. You have to be careful how much you take because it's an arsenic compound. It's very good anti-cancer, but you have to be careful. So when you chew those, first you get the taste. It's quite specific. But you keep chewing them, and you keep chewing them, and you get this incredibly powerful oil. It's almost as much as you can bear before you swallow it. Yeah, so I think I made the point. Please do this with your 5 senses, and then also think of this 6th consciousness, which is your mind experiencing its own field. Thoughts, memories, fantasies, ideas. Just like the eye enjoys shapes and colors, be aware when your mind is enjoying its own field, which seems like past, present, future, all of that. So please do that, bring these teachings to life. So then we moved on from form to feelings. We saw that feeling aggregate is quite simple in a way. It simply feels pleasant, unpleasant, or no feeling. But then last time we explored why something feels pleasant. Now here's the thing. Let's stop here. Let's jump ahead in our Abhidharma, in our Mahayana Abhidharma, and let's do a little bit of voidness so you can see the interest of this. So let's take, what can we take? Let's take the sixth consciousness, mind, and its field of experience. And out of its field of experience, memories. And a powerful memory. So if our mind goes there, not necessarily on purpose, but when a memory comes up, there can be a feeling, it can be a nice feeling, this kind of sort of thing you want to think of to make yourself feel good about life. When you're not feeling so good, you go back and you remember, you kind of relive, whatever that means, but you do kind of relive the nice feeling. But now we're looking at the moment, very precise, a mind moment. That memory comes up, feels, let's say, painful. Why is it painful? Because, well, that was a time when things happened, you hurt, this person hurt you, or you hurt somebody and you regret it. It's almost agonizing to think of it because of the way you hurt somebody else, for instance. Whatever it is, it's painful because of what happened. What happened was the result of many things, but including karma, and you making new karma. What is all of that? We call it interdependence, interdependent origination, karma, cause and effect. That's why you met the person, that's why you did what you did and made new karma. And that, if it's an unpleasant memory, is what means that the moment that that image comes in your mind, you don't feel good. But because it's interdependence, it's not fixed forever in space and time, unchangeable. It's a product of causes and conditions. We can recondition it. We can tell ourselves a new story, a positive story, a liberating story, whatever it is. We can work on the past pain and liberate it so that when eventually, after the work, the image comes up, you're neutral, you're indifferent, or maybe you've developed gratitude because you, through Dharma, have learned something through what happened in your past. And you feel grateful for that learning because it means in the future you're not going to cause the harm or get involved in such harmful situations, whichever way it is. Just an example. So when it says that feelings are void, ashunyata, are empty, then it's only an idiot who thinks that means they don't exist. But when it says they don't exist, it's only an idiot who thinks that means they don't exist. It means they don't exist ultimately. That's all. Doesn't mean they don't exist in the English language sense. It means they don't exist ultimately, fixed, unchangeable. It means they only exist interdependently through the power of causes and conditions, and they can be changed. So feelings just now are really quite interesting. They're part of our thermometer for how well our Dharma practice is doing. When you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and use your mind, or your mind is just working, even if you don't want it to. It's there bringing up images you'd rather it didn't. It's been busy. Then we should know that the meaning of voidness is that it's a product, a passing, impermanent product of interdependence that has no set in stone value, and it can be changed. So when we experience feelings and we explore feelings with mindfulness, then we can look. It's like me with my diet. I was talking about it. I can't remember already if it was in the talk or before the talk. But, you look at things and that kind of attraction. It's like, for me, bakers. Right? The smell of, France. I remember when the 16th Karmapa and this busload of lamas, including Khenpo Sotim Jansu, when we were in Paris, everyone went mad on baguette. We were going out several times a day to buy armloads of baguettes because it was just so crispy, fresh, delicious. And everyone was eating far too much, the Tibetans coming along. So, France has got good bakers. And so for me, if I'm going past the baker, the smell is kind of there. And in the past, I'd always find an excuse to pop in and buy a croissant or something like that. It's only a croissant, it's only a little thing. But now I'm in discipline mode. And so it's changed through the power of interdependence and all the work I'm doing on my mind and on my nose to become indifferent. It comes in a moment, and then it's, so what? So what? Just a smell. And I'm heading for the place where the smell of croissant and a dog shit has the same effect. You don't mind if you tread on a croissant or you tread on a dog shit. That's where I'm heading for, and so on. So feelings, when we start our Buddhist path, 37 factors on the way to enlightenment. The first four, the four mindfulnesses: mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mind, mindfulness of Dharma. So when I'm encouraging you to explore these things, I'm encouraging you to cultivate mindfulness, which means you're aware. And not just aware, you're aware of things in a way where you have the library of Buddhist references in your mind to use your awareness of things in an intelligent and a very, very helpful way. So then last week we moved on to cognition. And I did send out to everyone who's registered the modified translation. It was a lot of work. That PDF that I first sent out from a person who was a computer genius who's not around anymore had a lot of unseen coding in it. So I bought new software, I've changed it to use the latest PDF software that can help you edit it and change it. But believe me, it is complicated. So I've sent you out a slightly different version with at least some of the vocabulary changed, but it's far from perfect as a document. But in there, now we're calling the third of these aggregates cognition. It was called in the original one perception, which is also a valid translation. The most useful is perhaps cognition when we first learn this topic, because with cognize we can put RE in front and it's recognize. So it's about how we recognize things. We did explore it a little bit in the last talk. So today we'll carry on with that investigation. And we saw that there are, in terms of the lists, the categories, there are 6 types related to the 5 senses and mind. So there's recognition or cognizing something that is seen, heard, smelt, tasted, or felt in the body, and then experienced by mind within its own field of what we call mind objects, mind's references, mind's objects. So now we saw it with the aggregate of feeling, that according to the first rather simplistic analysis, then in the first mind moment there is contact, so the eye sees. So the eye form sees visible form, shapes and colors. In the second moment there's a feeling, if there is a feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And in the third moment there is cognition or recognition. It's important to know that feeling comes before you recognize something, in that simple way of explaining it. So then there is cognition. We recognize shapes and colors. So we recognize, we cognize. And then basically this third aggregate has 2 aspects. There is non-conceptualized cognition and conceptualized cognition. So there's recognition of something without labeling, without terminology, without mental dialogue. Cognition, and then there's cognition, recognition with naming, labeling, mental dialogue. It can be very brief. It can be like your eye sees a skull and crossbones on a bottle, and because you've been conditioned by interdependence in the past, you know that means danger. So you get that not pleasant feeling, slightly not pleasant feeling. And then in the third step, you recognize poison. Your mind might say poison, one word, or you recognize poison. Or it might be a couple of words, don't touch that. It's like the immediate first thing that flashes in your mind, no, don't touch it. Don't go near it. Or if you see these radioactive sign, for instance, then you might have an immediate, not a long discursive, we're not talking about long discursive thoughts. We're talking about immediate reaction. Perception, feeling, recognition. So it can be either with concept or without. So in our practical work, homework, if we call it that, with this, then it's interesting to observe children, or to think about children growing up, learning to name, learning to recognize and distinguish. So that's a fairly straightforward process, something we can't observe too well, because we're working on assumption, but it's with animals. Now, animals, that's interesting. They recognize, but do they have a dialogue going on in their heads, or their wings, or their feet, or any part of them as they recognize? You see, bees and the butterflies recognizing the flowers. They get on them for nectar, for pollen or what. But is there something going on saying daisy or nice looking one, or that one looks the tastiest, or when they see water, if they see water humans have put out, or a pond or a puddle, is there a recognition? And if so, what kind of recognition? And of course, there's recognition in animals. They know very, very well what to eat, different type of grasses. If you're a rabbit going around a field, flowers and grasses, you recognize them. And like cats, they know what to eat if they feel sick. They go and eat things. Dogs, they make themselves vomit, so to get rid of a poisoning. So they recognize, but it's not necessarily discursive. It's not necessarily accompanied by concept. This is what we'd say in Dharma terms, accompanied by concept. Unaccompanied cognition, accompanied cognition. Accompanied by concept and names and labels. Now, of course, names become language. Language becomes powerful, and words have power. Because words have power, then we have been affected by words and labels, the way other people have labeled us. When they see you coming through the door, do they light up with technically a pleasant feeling? Second moment, first moment, eye contact. Then through their experience, second moment, pleasant feeling, Ken. Or unpleasant feeling, Ken. Oh, you're already looking for, how can I escape? What can I say? What excuse can I make to get away? Third moment, then there's a label. It might not just be Ken. You see, Ken's the simple one. It might be troublemaker. It might be. So I think we've all been projected on by other people, and there are labels we like and labels we don't like. The power of language. So cognition for humans in the human realm is very much linked with language. And then language, in the greater scheme of things, as we explore more interdependence and how it works, language is very much behind karma, painful karma, pleasant karma, and language, speech karma, hearing karma is very much on the agenda for where our bodhisattva path is taking us. So, just as I was saying earlier, with the smell, if it's the smell of baking croissants or the smell of dog shit, where we're going is not to be immediately affected, to have a mind of serenity. Of course, you'll avoid treading on the dog shit. You might still go and buy yourself a croissant, but you are not so dramatically involved with those things. You're less and less dramatically involved. If you can't have a croissant, it's no big deal. And if you trod in dog shit, it's not the end of the world. We're getting less and less fazed by these sensorial things which are always there. Our sensorial environment is so determinant of our happiness. So we want to be less and less the puppets of our sensorial environment, and language is very much part of this. It's very funny watching people listening to the radio, especially people in more, let's say, emotive countries like France, or here this part of France, or Spain, Italy. You can be listening, and people get more and more upset. Oh, and they bang the table. Oh, noise! Pas possible. This, and then France has got some beautiful expletives and swear words too. So all of that because of what? These vibrations coming into your ear. If it was in a language nobody understood, they'd be saying the same things, but it just then it's more like the sounds, the music of the language. It could sound quite nice. What? Nice modulation, nice music, and they could be saying terrible things, but you don't understand the language. So you're listening, and that's quite nice. Oh yeah. But the way Norwegians speak, such a fluty, high, sort of bouncy language, and so on. But then if you understand the words, well, then that gets interesting, doesn't it? They say in English, as if saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Kids say that at school. It's good training, but it's not true, because as they grow up, they'll find that what people say can really hurt, sometimes hurt more than physical hurt. The words can stay there all your life. What somebody said, you can hear them saying it. Beautiful words, painful words. So this power of speech, the power of labels and being labeled, is in one way, not directly, but in one way, very much linked to our understanding of cognition. Let's say our respect for this third aggregate of cognition. In basic Buddhist teachings, we're working a lot with feelings, reactive feelings, what pulls us, makes desire, what causes us unpleasant feelings, makes rejection, and so on. We're very much dealing with that level of things in the basic message, the most simple message of Dharma. As we go deeper, then cognition, how we cognize and label things, becomes a very interesting field for mindfulness. And then after the mindfulness is thorough and clear, then our use of Dhamma methods to transform our cognitive process. Now, this is where the term perceive or perception for this third aggregate is actually a very good term, because it's how we perceive each other, how we perceive things, how we perceive politics, how we perceive what our senses are experiencing moment after moment. They're the word perception. You perceive this person as an enemy, yet somebody perceives them as a friend. You wouldn't so much then say, I cognize this person as a friend or as an enemy. We do recognize them. I kind of recognize who it is. But then the perception, because of the way our mind labels and defines, and the whole history behind that definition, which makes today's label and the power it has work. So there's a lot to discover in this third aggregate. Here we're just looking at a very simple list. You've probably seen the text itself. Very simple. So let's have a quick look at it. So we've got those 6 cognitions due to vision, hearing, smelling, tasting, physical experience, mentation. Then it says there are also, so here we're on page, goodness knows, 12 maybe. It says there are also object-related distinctions. So things based upon what's in the 11 aspects of form, then the numbers 6 to 10. So related to the object, like color, blue, yellow, or sound will be like bassoon, flute, voice, or whatever it might be. And idea-related distinctions, to think in terms of man, woman. So these are our own categories. It's more on this side, it's in the perceiver's labeling, rather than in the nature of what is there. So all this is saying here is we've done form, we've seen there's a world out there that's known, and there are the 5 senses and the mind here, which are the knowers of those things. So we're saying when it comes to cognition, this aggregate, some of it's based on what's out there, the object world. Some of it's more based in here, the subject world. We're dealing very practically with our relative level world. We're not there with ultimate truth, and we're looking very practically at who we are and how we function in a very dualistic way, because generally that's how it seems to be. So it says there could be those 2 areas, objective, subjective. And it says you could carry on and make as many subdivisions as there are things to cognize. All cognitions are accompanied by characterization, except for the following instances. All cognitions are accompanied by characterization. Characterization, you could say definition in the broadest sense of the word. It's the way we define our world, what it is for us. So that's characterization, what they mean for us. So, but with some exceptions, we don't need to bother with these at the moment, unless you're an amazing shamatha meditator. But who knows, maybe some of you are, so we better bother with them. So the case, well, no, not the first one. First one is actually very interesting. It's cognition where even though the form is seen, or the sound is heard, or the smell is smelled, and so on, one is unfamiliar with the relevant terminology and is therefore unable to classify what one sees, or hears, or smells, or tastes, or experiences with the body. So then we can't define it, we can't characterize it, because we don't know what it is. So now, here's an interesting example. And for some reason, over the years, I've always applied the name, well, let's see in a minute. Imagine you're in a very, very, very vast landscape. So you're looking at the hills and some trees, and you can see a long, long way. And then, way away over there, there's a movement. And you can't tell what it is. Is it a bird, or is it somebody on the ground, or something on the ground? Is it a deer? human being. You can't characterize it and define it, because even though your eyes are seeing something, some little black thing moving, so you're curious, and it's coming closer, and it's coming closer. And then, oh, now you can see, oh, it's a human. You've characterized, but you're still looking, because now you say, oh, who's that then? Who's that out here in this? And so you're basically still aware with this form of the form that's over there. Now you've already cognized it, a human. But you're curious, so you're still very active through eye consciousness, and then closer and closer. And then all of a sudden, you recognize, it's George. So to remind myself in my notes of this, I put George, because I always use George for this example. It's the George example. Now what happens is, once you've recognized to that level, George, you stop looking. Of course, you look from time to time to see how it's getting closer. Shall I put the kettle on yet, or shall I wait another 5 minutes? Of course, you look, but that awakened looking, where your awareness is 100% with your eye consciousness, is very interesting. Now, let's flip that round. Once you've recognized George, your sensorial awareness is shut off, and you're inside your head. Oh, George is coming. I wonder what he wants. Does he take green tea or black tea? No, it's coffee. You're in there. You're in there. And what if he starts talking about this? No. Living in your head, we'd say in modern English, or living inside sixth mental consciousness, with the next aggregate we're coming to, mental formations, samskaras, playing a very important role. So this is where, here, if we go back into Mipam's text, we're looking at one case where there is no characterization, no definition, because although the senses are operative, we cannot recognize. It's a sound, but it's not clear enough for you to know if it's from animate sources, inanimate sources, if somebody is saying something, if it's seagulls, if it's a baby crying. Someday we don't know. We can't define it. So there's that very general case. It's happening a lot of the time. It's accompanied by the feeling, what's that then? What's that? What's that? It's, you don't know. Now the other two cases are when there is no characteristic, because we're in the dimension without characteristic. So that makes sense. We're in a state of meditation beyond mental activity, thinking activity, conceptual activity. For instance, with shamatha, when we have absorption, the very definition of absorption is you're absorbed. You can't think at the same time. If you can think at the same time you're practicing shamatha, you haven't achieved absorption. Absorption's absorption, you're gone. People, when they go into absorption, are inaccessible. You can't talk to them, they can't hear you, they can't see you. They're gone. People who practice shamatha, samadhi, it's called samadhi, then they go into it for a determined amount of time. Before you start, you go in for 1 hour, 1 day. Gampopa could do, I think some texts say 13 days, some say 15 days. But there you are 100% all the time in the focus of meditation, in your mind. These are mental absorptions. First dhyana, second dhyana, third dhyana, fourth dhyana. So there, your sense doors are there, you've still got eyes, but your mind is not receiving any of the messages, and it is not cognizing and recognizing and labeling and defining. So there are those meditation states, and then cognition when one is resting in the meditation of the peak of existence. When we look at the dhyanas, then we get 17 levels of dhyana absorption. Number 17, called the peak of existence, very, very useful and interesting place to be. There, the work of liberation is at its most powerful. And so this is another topic. This is when we study karma, actually. When we look at the karma of immobility, the karma of meditation, then we study the various levels and we start to understand what this word turgal in Tibetan, it means jumping back and forth, is about, whereby we need to gain such flexibility we can go to this level of second dhyana, from there to that level of fourth dhyana, from there to the formless meditation of this, and so on. So the 17 levels we can hop between. But of all of those 17, the peak of existence is very powerful, very useful. So we're not looking at that here, just because it says when you're in that state in particular, then there is no characterization, there is no conceptual activity, defining, recognizing, and so on. So all cognitions, all recognitions, all recognitions. You were just listening to all recognitions. And so not only did you hear it, you probably didn't have any feeling about it, it was just words, but you recognized the word all. It means all, not just some, all. You recognized it. And recognitions, you recognize recognitions as a word and as a meaning. This whole talk, you've been recognizing non-stop. How many things? This is why we talk about pumpo, aggregates, heaps. You have recognized how many words since we started? Not only recognized them, all the things they triggered in your mind, all those cognitions, understanding, labeling, what it meant for you. Pooh, so much. So it's an important point. It's saying, except for those three circumstances, you're recognizing all the time. You are cognizing non-stop. Gosh, our minds are so busy. They're so busy. You're recognizing all the time through the five senses, and then in our thoughts as we juggle and think and work things out, remember. So there, basically, we've got one more thing. There's also a sixfold categorization of cognition. So we're cognizing a lot of the time, all of the time, more or less. We can make, in the sense of broad bands, that's different spectrums of cognition. We could make, and here we get an example. We don't get the whole six. A sixfold categorization covering such things as, so some examples, narrow cognition, which is our cognition in the six realms. Humans, animals, devas, semi-gods, spirits, hell beings. In those realms, there is narrow cognition, because it takes place one moment at a time. Our senses work one moment at a time. Our mind works one moment at a time. We are each moment locked into a different cognition. So that's called narrow cognition. Vast cognition in the form dimension. So here we're looking at the world of samadhi, absorption in the different levels of dhyana. That is very vast, it's not narrow. And then there is limitless cognition, where we get limitless space, limitless consciousness. They are meditations, meditation of limitless space, limitless consciousness. It feels like you are at one with limitless space. You're not, but it feels like that. And so it's called the absorption in limitless space. It's what it feels like. And then there's limitless consciousness, because you realize that space is consciousness. That's the next one. So there are those meditations. Then it mentions the nothing whatsoever cognition. This is a very interesting one, because the feeling as you're absorbed, not just thinking, not just sitting, vaguely meditating, 100% absorbed for hours in nothingness. People would say these days, nothingness. Nothing, not anything, anywhere. Nothing, everywhere. Nothingness, limitless, nothing at all. It's what it feels like in the meditation. It's more than space. It's more than just endless consciousness. It's just nothing, anywhere. It's called the nothing whatsoever. Except that. There's somebody aware of nothing, so there's not nothing. Because if there was totally nothing, there'd be nobody having any experience. There'd be nothing of nothing or anything whatsoever. There is a cognition of nothing, but then what is it? Because it's not like the cognition of a sound, something tangible. And nothing, wherever your mind, it can't find anything. So it's not that type of regular cognition. Something knows that there's nothing to know. It gets complicated. And so the meditation after that is called, actually, it's his title, Neither Cognition Nor Absence of Cognition. And you can't go more than that. So you go in those 4 formless meditations from infinite space to realizing that space is really consciousness, so infinite consciousness. Then you realize that consciousness is nothing whatsoever. And then, although there's nothing whatsoever, as I just described, there is some cognition of nothing whatsoever, so it's neither cognition nor absence of cognition. We don't spend a lot of time with those in our Vajrayana journey, but we need a taste. We need a taste of very valuable experiences. We don't spend weeks and months in those as a remedy to our samsara. Buying croissants and being for a week in nothing whatsoever, if you're really in nothing whatsoever for a week, no desire. You break your whole samsaric patterning, conditioning, your history. You can't come back from a week of nothing whatsoever unchanged. Even a few seconds of nothing whatsoever could be a life-changing experience. So they are useful meditations, but we don't spend much time with them. Here, we're just looking at them in terms of cognition. So now we'll move on for just a brief introduction to aggregate number 4. This is the big one. This is the complicated one. And once we get in there and go through the list, we'll see it actually contains some of the others. So that gets a little bit like a Mobius ribbon. But anyway, we'll get there when we get to it. So it says, now we're looking at what in Sanskrit are samskaras. In Tibetan, duche. Du means coming together. Che means creating, making. Now the previous one we had, which was cognition, is called samja. It means the same in Tibetan is dushe. Dushe, however you pronounce it, is part of Tibet. Du means coming together, but there it means knowing. She means knowing. So it's cognition, it's recognizing when your eye comes together with a visible, then we recognize, we know that coming together. Here we're looking at du che, which means the creative power of factors coming together. And here, when we look, we're looking at what's at the heart of karma. We're looking at how does karma happen? How do you end up making karma? So when we look at this, and we looked at the title, in English we can call it conditioning factors, mental creations. There's so many possibilities in English. I think it's easier to call it samskaras. It says, essentially, or the essence, the aggregate of conditioning factors has a genuinely generative property, i.e., this aggregate actually creates compounds, conditions, creates karma, compounds the various circumstances and conditions that make karma happen. Within this aggregate are discussed all those things, all conditioned things not covered by the other four aggregates. So before we go on to the two main categories, conditioned things is a new term in this course. You probably come across it. You probably come across it in the greatest, best known statements of the Buddha. All conditioned phenomena are impermanent. As soon as something's conditioned, what we call conditioned, it can't last. It has a beginning, a duration, and an end. Very big teaching of the Buddha. All things that come together separate, all that's built up falls down, all meeting ends in parting, all life ends in death. Very famous. But the actual overall statement is all conditioned phenomena. The word for phenomena is dharma in Sanskrit. All conditioned dharma are impermanent. So what does conditioned mean? Conditioned means created by cause and conditions. Conditions, does that make sense? But when we explore that, which we don't do here, we will do later on in the aggregates if we ever get there, but we will do later, we'll look at how it all works. But cause usually means one prime cause. That prime cause has the genetics of the result. For instance, very simple example in nature, a seed. That seed, or first human cell, has all the genetics for the human it's going to become. The seed has all the genetic definition of the flower it will become, the color of the flower, the shape of the petals, the way it will grow. Everything about it is there in the seed. When we make karma, there is a prime cause. What we do already by the fact that we've done it, has determined the result. So it's like the seed, the result's not there yet, but what that daisy seed, poppy seed, wheat seed is going to become, rice seed, is already there, programmed at the outset. A very important thing to understand. What we do now is already writing the future. It's written. By the time the action's finished, you've written your future. It's not there yet, but so that's the prime cause. It is unique. If we take flowers, so far, nothing else in the whole universe can do what that prime cause does. If you have a poppy seed, only a poppy seed can make a poppy. No other seed, no laboratory, nothing in the entire universe can make a poppy except the poppy seed. Think about that. It's amazing. It's amazing. So when we make karma, the actions, the various actions, have their prime power. But just like a seed needs fertilizer, warmth, water, soil to become its result, so our mind creations, what we're looking at here in samskaras, need circumstances, conditions they're called. So it's called primary cause, secondary conditions. Causes, conditions. Primary cause, secondary conditions. Those secondary conditions are the same for a poppy seed, a rice seed. They all need fertilizer, warmth, water. But the prime cause is the only thing that can make the result. But when they come together sufficiently, then the result is foretold. It's bound to happen. So here, that's the meaning of conditioned. All conditioned things are impermanent. So the aggregate of conditioning factors has a genuinely generative property, like the seed. It has the power to create what comes afterwards, generative, giving rise to property. Within this aggregate are all those conditioned things, all the coming together of causes and conditions, not covered by the other four aggregates. Other four aggregates: form, feeling, cognition, consciousness. Now we come into two main categories. They're called the accompanied factors and the unaccompanied factors. So accompanied, unaccompanied. Accompanied by what? Now this is where it gets linguistically difficult. There are more words for mind in Sanskrit and Tibetan than we have in English. Accompanied by mind. That's what it says. Of course, if you're a Chittamatrin and you think that everything is mind, then there is nothing which is not unaccompanied by mind. If everything is mind, all is mind. So what does mind mean here? It does have a specific meaning. If we put it, how can you say, roughly at first, it's you're aware, conscious of what you're doing, kind of, which means like there's something to be seen, you have the power to see, you are looking at it, you are cognizing it. So the looking at it is seeing consciousness, and you are cognizing, recognizing it. And so you're doing that intentionally, sort of, or even if it's not intentional, that's what your mind, in that sense, is doing. So this mind is called chitta in Sanskrit, like we have in bodhicitta. The word chitta can be used very broadly, it can be used more specifically. So we've got in Sanskrit vijnana for mind. We usually translate that as consciousness. We've got manas, which is mental activity in general. We've got chitta, which is this more kind of active, like in the expression, use your mind. It's when we're using our mind. It's much more than that. So let's look at it a little bit more technically before we finish for today. And let's jump to the fifth aggregate, consciousness. So dear Khenpo Sotim Jamtsa, he was the first one who showed me how Khenpos usually roll back their sleeve and use their hand and their forearm to talk about this. We'll come back to this, but just now so we can understand what's being said here, accompanied, unaccompanied. Okay. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, consciousnesses. Right? Not just so consciously you're seeing, like in this moment you're mainly seeing, you're mainly hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. 5 sense consciousnesses. Now, this part of the forearm near the elbow is knowing. This is chitta. This is knowing. So although your eyes are open, your ears are working, your nose is working, not plugged up, your tongue's able to taste, and your body's nerves are working, they won't all be feeding into this moment's chitta, awareness. So awareness is either going to be going to this one, or that one, or to another one. So you're primarily like seeing. Like now you're primarily, I hope, listening, because I'm talking. So you're following the ideas. And you may be so intently listening that your fifth consciousness doesn't realize you've got an itchy foot. Just now you're checking to see if you've got an itchy foot, aren't you? Your consciousness just went to your foot. Or if what you've got in the oven is burning, so then all of a sudden you have a quick sniff to see if it's burning. But you're listening so intently that hearing consciousness is feeding chitta. Central awareness, let's call it, central awareness. So we've got the 5 senses, and they can move very quickly from one to the other in split seconds, but one at a time. But then our central awareness, chitta, is also aware of its own field, which is mental objects, number 6. 6th consciousness. So sometimes we're thinking, we're remembering, we're fantasizing, meditating in a way where the 5 senses are not really our central awareness. It's not the main thing our mind's aware of. Our mind is in itself, so it has its own objects. So this thing, our central awareness, is very important. Through meditation, we'll learn to put it where we want it. Not for it to be drawn through habit to wherever it's gone. Baking croissants, for instance. To be drawn by habit, we learn to put central awareness. So it's just to explain chitta, central awareness. So when we say accompanied by chitta, or unaccompanied by chitta, we've got our 2 main categories. When we go deeper, then first we look at the accompanied factors, and these are called mental events. Different translators use different terms, but we have, and we'll stop there with the list, with the title, 51 mental events. This is the big one. This is taking the clock of mind apart. These are all the different cogs and springs and joining pieces. 51 mental events, key to this generative power of us making karma. Why did we do it? How do we do it? How did it happen? The answers in here is very important, and it's why, for instance, Vajrayogini wears a garland of 51 flowers, where these 51 mental events have become an adornment rather than the cause of suffering, karma, or 51 skulls, where you've gone so far beyond that stuff's like it's not like a fresh head of a recently decapitated corpse. It's all dried up and gone. It's ancient history. It's a skull. Okay, so let's dedicate anything that was good and useful from today. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained by the main enemy, our mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become free from the ocean of existence, troubled by the waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. May its development know no setbacks, and may it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. So, thank you for cognizing all of this. And now it's over to you for your input, comments, suggestions, questions.
Hi, Ken. First of all, it's the fourth session today rather than the third.
All
just
right.
to mention.
Sure.
This definition of feelings is very interesting because the normal way we use that word in English, there's hundreds or thousands of feelings, but here it's like, dislike, neutral.
Yeah.
It's so simple, but very useful, because in the moment that we have a feeling, it's quite easy. Well, it can be quite easy to shift gear from like to neutral, or from unlike to neutral. It's quite simple. Although I find it simpler to do for unlike rather than for like, because if we like something, we're not so keen on shifting it. It reminds me of what you said, that Pema Chodron once said, that people go to her to ask her about anger and hatred, but not so many people go to ask her about sexual desire. Yeah, but the ability to shift gear, once you've only got three things to worry about, like, dislike, or neutral, it's very quick to shift from one to the other.
But what's going to happen is that as we explore these samskaras now, 51 mental events, then we'll see that what this vague word in English, feelings, covers is actually feeling, as we've seen so far, as an outcome reaction from things we've experienced before. So when we experience them in this moment, they either are pleasant or unpleasant because of all of that. But we'll see it's that feeling, but mixed with one or another of these different mental events. Some are virtuous, some are unvirtuous. You know, it's like desire or attachment. They're not in the feelings category, they're in the mental event category. And so once we get the precision of recognizing that what's happening in me in this moment is a pleasant feeling because of my attachment, or because of desire, or an unpleasant feeling because of aversion, or one of the many subcategories of aversion. We have 21 subcategories of the three main mind poisons. So we start to see much more precisely what's happening in the moment. And then through the vaster Dharma work and meditation itself, which just throws a light on our conditioning, we'll see with enough precision to fix it. That's where the samskaras.
Yeah, thank you.
Fascinating.
And this reminds me of being sat in a class about 10 years ago, actually, with quite a accomplished psychologist. And he was interestingly explaining a little bit like the feelings of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. But he framed it in a very different sort of way. He talks about it in the way people interact with us. And he said that people are either giving you a +1 and -1 or a neutral. That was his framework he was presenting. And it kind of made sense at the time. But thinking about it now, he articulated that as regard to what other people
Exactly.
when in fact it's my interpretation of what's going on out there that's actually going on.
Yeah, there's nothing more infuriating than somebody trying to cheer you up when you're depressed. Because suddenly you feel like punching them on the nose, you know, they're trying to tell you positive things. And I mean, they're being kind, they're being helpful. They're giving you a +1. But sometimes when we're entrenched in our self-pity, which is one of the mind poisons, then it's the last thing in the world you want to hear. It's just almost, it's like highlighting how wretched you feel. They tell you you've got so many reasons to be grateful and happy. You just want to get rid of them. So very much, very, very, very true, James.
And this chap actually made a name for himself in professional rugby league football in this country. And I mean, he was well intentioned.
Yeah.
He was the psychological coach when they were first come on the scene about 10 years ago for this club in the UK. And one of his strategies that got him great acclaim by this club was he would watch the opposition and he would look for the guy who was unsettled, and he would tell the coach that one, and then the team wouldn't do anything horrible to him. They'd just put pressure on it, kick the ball to him, and this guy would crumble and then create a weakness in the opposing team. In other words, they would play on his unpleasantness of his condition, of his situation. So, yeah, practical example. It all comes back to, yes, like you were just saying, it's actually our own interpretation of what's going on. And I liked what you were saying, Neil, about jumping from one to the other. I'm going to go and try that.
Well, here we're talking about dhyana meditation and samadhi. So first you need to get to the state of absorption in one level, then another level. Then you can practice jumping between. But getting to a state of absorption is really quite something. We start to get, you read about siddhis, these spiritual accomplishments where people have special powers, superpowers, whatever you call them. Once we get samadhi, real samadhi, authentic samadhi, which is total absorption, then you get the siddhis. So my answer to you, it's a very optimistic one. Then, yes, when you get to that point, of course you'll do jumping in between, because the point is you can be absorbed, but you have total mastery over it. It's not how it is at first, where you're kind of gone. You have to learn how to be gone, but so flexibly in control that you can be gone in that way too, or gone in this way at the drop of a hat. I remember, so unfortunately not an experience I had myself. It's when I very first went to Dharmacharya, and 1970 so, and my best friend went off to Darjeeling for a couple of weeks to see the previous Kalu Rinpoche. And he said, I went to see him to ask about meditation and about my own meditation. And then I forget his exact words, but he said, Kalu Rinpoche just said, look, you need to reach a state where you can go into perfect samadhi just like this. And he said, then he was gone in front of me. He felt it through Kalu Rinpoche's blessing. He felt the state Kalu Rinpoche had gone into, and then out. He said, when you can do that, then we can talk about the next thing. It does mean that, because now we labor with shamatha. It's to get the mind that's still, really truly still, and not busy, not gone off in thoughts, not distracted by the senses. And that stillness, we have to work very hard for moments of that, or a little duration of that. But what we need to get to is a point where you can just do it. And then when you can do it, because there are different samadhis, this jumping. So it's like you've got chef d'orchestre, your conductor is your teacher, second dhyana, okay. First form is third dhyana. Each dhyana's got 4 levels. So then you need to be able to do it. And so many millions of meditators have done it in the past, so we'll get there for sure.
Ken, quick question. What you were just describing, this total absorption, is there any chance of ever achieving it without a teacher? When there's no teacher to be had where you live, and it's just not, seemingly not possible.
Yeah, it's possible if you have the correct instructions, and it says it's the coming together of 3 things. Sorry, it's always numbers, but it's how I remember the teachings. Okay, it's the coming together of 3 things. Is your method, your instructions are properly applied. You have what they call bhakcha in Tibetan, which means in past lives we've done this sort of thing before. It's more helpful if it was in recent past lives, but we've all done some of it somewhere back there. So we've got a history we can waken up. So we apply the correct method to wake up the history that's in us, and then we all have Buddha nature is the third thing, which has the potential to produce all the different meditation states. So, and then the blessing of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, if we've taken refuge, even if it's not tangible for us, it's really there. All my best teachers, all of them, they've always said, they put it in Vajrayana terms, Guru Rinpoche has been above your head every single moment of your life. Tara has been there, Buddha has been there. So if our motivation and method is good, and we have the correct instructions, then yes. If you have the blessing of a teacher, then of course that can very much help. But the whole point of the Buddha's teaching is that we do it ourselves. The teacher wants to get rid of you because they want you to be independent.
Thank you. Oh, well.
Good luck.
Positive. Thank you.
Okay, maybe we finished for today. And we did the dedication. So now the next session is in 2 weeks' time. Next Saturday is our monthly Tonglen group. So see you in 2 weeks' time for 51 mental events. Have a nice time till then. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes, Ken. Ciao
Bye,
now,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye-bye, Ken.
Thank you. Bye bye, Ken.
Bye-bye.